So guys, we have the next speaker before the coffee break, Ozan from Longhorn Games. Will have a speech about a new era of arcade idol. So the stage is yours, please, Ozan. Begin.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. So, yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank to the Hyper Games Conference organizers for inviting me. I'm really happy to be a part of this beautiful event. My name is Ozan Kaşıkçı. I'm the co-founder of the Longhorn Games. And today I will be talking about our experience with the arcade idol game genre in general. And also I will talk you through about what we have gone through while we were developing the Dream Restaurant, the first hit arcade idol game of ours. So yeah, first off, a little bit of introduction about Longhorn Games. Longhorn Games was founded in October 2020, myself and another co-founder. What we do is developing hyper-casual and arcade idol games. And we are Istanbul-based, so we're in Turkey. And I believe we have developed more than 100 games by now. Yeah. We had 2 launches and 1 soft launch. Dream Restaurant was our first launch, which is also the arcade idol game that I'm going to be talking about. And we had a recent launch, Crowd Evolution, and a soft launch, Never Ever Runner. And we have more than 20 million downloads worldwide so far. Yeah, so let's dive into the topic of arcade idol. So if you ask the question, what is an arcade idol game? So it's a mix of hyper casual, arcade, and idol genres, and it just brings in some elements from all these different genres into one game. It must have the simplicity and the catchiness of the core loop of a hyper casual game, so it should be able to be played with just one finger, with your thumb, basically. And it incorporates some idle mechanics into the game. So that means over time you gather some resources even if you don't play the game. Also, you need to have some meta features in order to keep the player engaged. So an example of this is an upgrade or expanding your restaurant or buying some new machines, or I don't know, it's just the things that you improve over the lifetime of the game. So if you close the game today and start again tomorrow, you will be improving from where you left off. That's basically the definition of a meta feature. So yeah, if you break down an arcade idol game into its core components, the most common thing you will see is the resource collection. In all the arcade idol games, there is definitely a resource that you can collect. And the collection of this resource happens via a stacking mechanism. So this happens, most of the time it happens in the game itself in a 3D form, but sometimes it also happens on the UI. For example, My Little Universe was an example of that. So the resources that you are collecting was basically increasing on the UI, but not in the game itself, in a 3D form, I mean. And you also need to have a way to consume the resources, of course, because there must be a reason for collecting those. And this can be in various forms. It can be via upgrading, it can be via expanding, buying something that can be useful for you, stuff like that. And the last element that is common is the meta progression or multiple meta progressions. So most of the most common meta progression you can see in the arcade album games is the expansion. So you can expand your area, your territory in the game as you play it. Also, adding some more upgrades just makes the game easier for you. And as you play the game, you get to see some new content. So this also keeps the player engaged with the game. Yeah, so there are really nice advantages of arcade idol. First of all, it's really fun to develop an arcade idol game because you get to try more ideas. It's basically an uncharted territory, so there isn't really too many games in that genre yet. So I believe there are a lot of opportunities still, and it has some better retention and better playtime values. So for example, day one, 45 to 55 to even maybe 60 is pretty possible in the arcade idle genre, which is not really possible in the hyper casual. And playtime is like immensely higher. So it's possible to go to something like 80 minutes, which would be basically again impossible for a hyper casual game. But also there are some disadvantages as well. For example, the CPI is almost always really high when it comes to arcade idle games, and that's because the audience isn't that wide as opposed to hyper casual games. So you need to compensate the high CPI somehow. And the development of an arcade idle game is of course harder because you implement more features, and it's really hard to iterate over what you already have. Because since the genre is relatively young, there aren't really too many examples in the market. And especially when we were building the Dream Restaurant in particular, there was almost no example of it. So we were basically building the game and also learning about the genre at the same time. Yeah, so how it all started, the ideation phase of the Dream Restaurant was, so we had a desire for innovation. We wanted to bring something new to the market. We wanted to give the player some freedom and a meta progression that they can play for a prolonged time, not for 1 day or 2 days, for weeks basically. And also we know that we wanted to reach out to the mass audience. For that, we had to keep the gameplay simple, and also the core mechanics should be really satisfying and catchy. And the feedbacks should be really clear because the player should know immediately what to do. So yeah, so this is how our first version of Dream Restaurant looked like. We basically were really focused on the core mechanic, and we were basically trying to adjust it to the point where it's really satisfying. And also we were trying to keep the game really simple and easily understandable and provide some really clear objectives. So that's how it looked like. It was really simple. There was some pretty bad looking sprites and a few tables and a restaurant that you can expand. And here you can see that you can collect the resources from these machines and basically stack them on your tray and serve them to the customer and get some money from them. So there was a core loop that we developed, and we saw that it was really satisfying and fun to play. So we improved on that, and we improved the art style a little bit. So the tables and customers and everything was looking a little bit better, but we still focused on the core mechanic first and foremost. We improved the food serving feeling, we improved the table unlocking feeling, the collection of the money. All these constitutes our core mechanic in Dream Restaurant, and it's the core loop of the game. So even if you don't do anything, you can just have fun just by picking up some food and serving them to the customers and get some money from them. So that catchy core loop was the core of the game, really. And we also had to find a way to measure the retention and playtime. So the simplest solution I could find for that was basically infinitely expandable restaurants. So you could play as long as you want, basically. That's something also we can suggest or recommend to other studios. You can just implement it into your game, and you can basically measure the retention and playtime without adding too much new content. Yeah, so the first results, they were pretty good in terms of retention and playtime. The CPI was high, but I think that was expected. So we weren't surprised about that. But we learned some lessons. As I mentioned, there wasn't an example of arcade idle genre when we first started. Maybe there were a few ones, like Moon Pioneer and Farmland, but that was all. So we found out that focusing on the core loop is the key, and we must make sure that we have enough content to measure the retention and playtime. And also, I believe the art style was also important in the results that we yielded. So arcade idle games, maybe they require a little bit of some better art style. Yeah, so the first results were really exciting for us, but we had to improve on them. So we know that the core mechanic was pretty solid, so we focused on the meta progression on this iteration. And we implemented an onboarding system because the game was getting more complicated. And one of the first rules is that we had to keep the feedback clear and the objectives clear. So for that, we introduced an onboarding system by using some pretty large arrows where they just show the users where to go and what to do. And I believe it worked pretty well. And a lot of other games and studios took this as an example. And so I think it was a pretty good development on the onboarding. And upgrades, I think it's also a must in Arcade Idle because it's one of the best ways for the user to consume the resources that they have collected. It's really a satisfying feeling, and it also reinforces the I believe the playtime and retention because the gameplay feels better when you upgrade something in general. So we added some upgrades, so you could get some more money from the customers. You can expand your money collection diameter, and you could make the waiters move faster, and also the customers faster. And we added some more content. We added some waiters. We added some new restaurants, some idle mechanics, and also a way to customize your restaurant in order to, again, increase the playtime and retention. And yeah, as it turned out, the Arcade Idle development wasn't so easy because we spent, I think, about a month on this development. And we were getting better results, but CPI was still a problem. And it's a tough one to crack because we were also spending some energy on the CPI, but it wasn't really going super well. Although the other metrics was getting significantly better. So yeah, what we learned from this second iteration is that you need to stick to this core loop of your game, and you need to enhance the game around it. So once you have a solid core loop, then you can build on top of it whatever basically you want. And the meta features that we added on this iteration worked super well, and you're basically getting much better results retention-wise and playtime-wise. But the core loop, the importance of core loop, once again improved, it was tested and improved on this iteration. Yeah, and then we moved on to the next iteration. We had to find something crazier on this iteration because we basically implemented a lot of new features and we wanted to go beyond that. And we started to explore some new and crazy ideas. And one of them was adding a map to the game, I believe, which wasn't done before. So now after a level in the game, you get to introduce a map feature, and you can basically just exit from your restaurant and enter into the map, where you can see your restaurant and other restaurants as well. So now you have some rivals on the map, and you can navigate freely on the map, and you can observe what they are doing, and it basically gives a feeling of a multiplayer game. And I think it was a crazy step that we took. Luckily, it worked super well. Also, we added some other feature into the game, which was a town board where you compete with others. So as you serve more foods and expand your restaurant more, you get a better score. But also, meanwhile, the other players in the map, they also get some better scores. So you compete with them and try to be the first one within a time period of something like 20 days. And this also improved the playtime retention in a great sense. So it was, again, something we took example from the arcade games, the mid-core games, and both the map and the town board features was something new in the hyper-casual and arcade idle genre. Yeah, so with the third iteration, we got some better results. There was 10% increase in all the metrics, and we increased the revenue by 5%, which was pretty good as well. And what we learned from this iteration is that innovation is the key in arcade idle. You should be crazy enough to try your ideas, and just don't be afraid if they're not going to work. Although it's really hard to keep the balance in this genre because you need to invest a lot of time in order to develop some good features and get some good results. You still need to innovate and basically don't be afraid. Yeah, another thing was the monetization in the game, because we built a lot of features and we had to find a way to monetize them. And the regular approach in a hyper-casual game would be using some interstitial ads between the levels, which we didn't have any levels in the game, or use some rewarded features for some simple rewards. But Dream Restaurant was different in that sense, because we had to scatter the rewarded ads into the game, like all over the game. So we started with some waiter upgrades. We made the waiters upgradable, so they could also collect some money now, which worked great. We also added a feature in order to be able to hire as many waiters as you want by watching more rewarded ads. Also worked super well, because apparently people really love the idle feeling of the game, and buying or hiring more waiters was something they needed apparently. And we added some booster features, something like Gold Rush and VIP Day. So once you watch these ads, some crazy stuff happens in the game. For example, Gold Rush means all your food turns into gold, and you get more money, you serve faster, you run faster. So it's kind of really excites the player. And with these boosters, we also increased our results a lot by a great margin. And VIP Day means we have some VIP customers in the game. And once you activate the VIP Day, all the customers become VIP. And they basically pay more, and they are basically shinier than the normal customers. So it's also something, so it's also a special event that you can obtain by watching a rewarded ad. So we introduced some boosters, like, for example, the money back. It was one of the best working ads in the game. So people basically want to get a clear and really visible reward by watching the ads. And the most visible thing in the game was the money, basically. So the money back worked super well. And we also innovated again here, because we introduced some Wheel of Luck object into the game. where you can watch an ad and basically turn the wheel and get something out of it, which worked again pretty well. We added a super waiter, which you can see on the right bottom corner. So you would hire this super waiter for 10 minutes and it was super fast, something like Superman, and would just run around and serve customers in a super manner. And another innovation I believe we introduced. And we introduced some more customization where you can obtain by watching some rewarded ads. And you were able to expand by watching some ads. You were able to purchase some lands on the map by watching ads. So stuff like that. We introduced a lot of monetization aspects to the game in order to make it profitable. And I believe it worked pretty well. And Dream Restaurant achieved more than 20 million downloads now and is still receiving a lot of downloads. And it was super fun to develop. And it's been a game that we are proud of, basically. And it was one of the first arcade idle games, and I believe it's been a trendsetter for the market. So yeah, I think that was it. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you so much. A very interesting and unexpected presentation for at Hyper Games Conference, I must admit, but really exciting. We've got several questions to you, and I would appreciate if you can answer them. The first of them is there enough space in market for more arcade idle games yet? What do you think?
I believe that there's a lot of space in the market, but it just boils down to the CPI results. So as long as you can find some low CPI, there are so many opportunities in the market. So that means you need to find a theme that is appealing to the mass audience, and also an idea in which you can implement a satisfying and easy core loop. So if you bring all these elements together, I believe there's a lot of opportunities in the market, and we are also working hard to bring in the next hit arcade game.
Thank you. The next question, what is the initial CPI and CPI on the second iteration?
I don't really remember, but I believe it was around maybe 80 cents or something like that. But it doesn't really matter because the CPI change all the time, right? So even in a month, you will see a different CPI. So what really is important is that once you have the average CPI, then if you have a strong enough core loop and gameplay, then you will be able to make a profitable game. Because remind you, these games they can have a playtime of 80 minutes on day one. So you can have a really good LTV and compensate the high CPI.
Thank you. What's the ideal LTV in arcade idle?
Ideal LTV, well, that really depends on the game, because that also depends on the CPI. But I believe an ideal LTV should be around $2 at least in order to make the game profitable. Something like $3 or $4 is also possible, but hard to achieve. But yeah, the ideal case I believe would be something like $2.5, I would say. But that's just an estimation, and it of course always depends on the game and the situation in the market at that point in time. So that depends.
Thank you. Did you see any difference in scaling, retention, engagement time between Android and iOS?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because indeed our game worked better in Android for some reason. And especially in some countries it worked better. For example, I believe it was working better in Russia and India, and some specific countries really cherish the game better than the others for some reason. Maybe it's because of the culture, or maybe it was because of the CPI values, I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. What is the ratio for rewarded revenue, interstitial revenue, and IAP you are aiming for?
Oh man, yeah. That's another question that really depends on the game. I mean, it's really hard to answer this question, but you can calculate this based on the CPI and LTV, based on the CPI and LTV that you have. So it means you just, in the end, you need to make more money than your spendings. It boils down to that.
Thank you. And do you gather analytics from players? If so, how do you process them? Which of those are more important in development?
Analytics from, I believe that's out of context, but how it's done is basically by using some SDKs. And we, of course, ask for permission from the user. And then there are some SDKs that we insert into our games. And these SDKs basically gather some data.
Thank you. What are some games that innovated successfully in this genre?
Some games that are innovative and successful. Well, yeah, there are some. So I believe one of the most innovative ones was the Moon Pioneer, because of his unique art style, and it was also one of the first arcade idle games, and also its theme was really outlandish, right? It was pretty unique, because most of the hyper casual publisher would say that a theme of a space wouldn't work well, but that game broke that notion, I would say. And in this sense of art style and gameplay, I would say it was pretty well. And also Farmland, again, it was one of the first idle games, and it was just something new in the market. So I would say these two.
Thank you so much. What's the ideal people count to develop arcade idle game in 2-6 weeks?
I don't believe there is an ideal amount of people, because we developed the Dream Restaurants mostly with just 2 people, but I don't believe most of the studios would be able to do that. And that is because we had a lot of experience prior to that, and it made it easier for us to develop the game. But yeah, it's really, I mean, I would say, let's say 4 or 5 people, but again, that depends.
Thank you. The general feedback on arcade idle games that I've heard is that the grind feels pointless after a while, meaning earning more and more money gets boring. How can we counter this?
Yeah, that's indeed the case, because we most of the time focus on the core loop of the game, and once you do that like millions of times, then it gets boring and the game doesn't go anywhere. So there was also the situation we faced with after our second iteration, because the user would be able to expand the restaurant and serve customers more and more, see some new content. But after a while, this also gets boring, right? User wants something new. Then we introduce a map feature. That's why I mentioned that you need to be kind of thinking out of the box and be innovative in order to keep the players engaged. So the map feature worked really well for us, and also we added some competition into the game. These also made the game more interesting. And what else can it be? I think in the end, you just need to, we also try to bring in some new mechanics into the game, which I didn't mention in this presentation, but we tried some other iterations as well. We tried a lot of different things in order to keep the game more interesting and prevent the issue that was just asking the question. And bringing in some more mechanics could be something new in the market, and it's hard to implement, but I think it can also be a way to prevent this. And also you can elaborate on the core mechanic. For example, in our game, you can just pick up the food and serve it, but maybe you can add another layer on top of this. And first you collect some resources, you process them, and then you cook the food, and then you serve it, for example. So there are some ways, I believe, still that can be made in order to improve this situation. But again, this genre is so young and so new to everyone that there are so many things that still hasn't been tested.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ozan. Really very inspiring and insightful presentation. Thank you for answering so many questions with precision and numbers. Have a great day and conference, and join us again next time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.